My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my list of the 10 worst movies of 2023. And do keep in mind, I have not seen every movie, but I'm not going to purposely seek out movies I know how to despise. So, let's begin with the 10th worst movie of 2023, and it's called Malum. Now, nobody really knows about this movie, but it's a remake of a 2014 movie called Last Shift, and I thought Last Shift was terrible. But then the exact same director decided to remake it, and that got my attention. Like, did he learn from his mistakes and he's going to give us a superior version of this story? And I watched Malum, and it somehow managed to be even worse. So it's like, why does this movie exist? It is the exact same movie. It looks and feels the exact same way. Like, I just can't comprehend why they decided to make this movie again. It is a very boring movie, it is never scary, and it does the entire overplayed what's real and what's not real, and I just thought it was a terrible piece of shit that just shouldn't have been made. And even if it did get made, like, how do you not make it better? Like, it's very frustrating. The ninth worst movie of 2023 is Cocaine Bale. And the entire movie is just the director being like, what if a Bale did cocaine? Isn't that the funniest thing ever? No, it's not. This movie is just a singular joke dragged out for 90 minutes. There is so many characters, and it's just overly convoluted and just feels like a mess. It's a movie that bored me, and despite the short runtime, feels very dragged out. It never made me laugh, it's never entertaining, it's just one giant disaster. Like, my expectations for this movie were low. I just wanted to have fun with it, and I was surprised at just how uninteresting and how unenjoyable this movie is. So that's why it comes in ninth place. The eighth worst movie of 2023 is actually one I was excited for, and it kind of bums me out to put it on this list, but it's The Haunted Mansion. I like the 2003 movie, I like The Ride, and I just miss that era where they made spooky kids movies. And I felt like this could have been a great comeback. And it's just so obvious from the first 10 minutes that this movie's going to be a mess. Like, you get introduced to the main character and his girlfriend, and then it immediately cuts to like 5 years later where he's grieving, and then it cuts to the family moving into this house, and then they leave the house, and then it cuts back to the first guy, who then gets dragged to the house, and then he goes to the house and the family's still there, and it just had a very awkward pacing to it, like right from the get-go, and the movie never gets better. There's all these different characters played by great actors like Danny DeVito, Owen Wilson, what's the main guy? You know what? I don't like Lakeith Stanfield. I think he is very bad in this movie. But you got so many characters, and everyone is just as boring as can be. It tries to explore grief, but it's as uninteresting as possible. The movie is never remotely scary. Like, you can watch some old kids movies and be like, oh, that's kind of dark, or that's kind of spooky. You know, like, The Little Mermaid. When she takes the voice from Ariel, it's really creepy, and you just get nothing like that here. Also, the movie's never funny. It's actually quite embarrassing how unfunny this movie is. And the CGI is ugly. Like, this is a hideous looking movie. And what really pisses me off is that this movie was going to be directed by Guillermo del Toro with Ryan Gosling, and instead we got this piece of shit. So honestly, hated this movie, and it's long. Like, it's over 2 hours long, and I felt it. The seventh worst movie of 2023 is called The Outwaterers, and this is one of those movies where I had to go back and watch my review because I've just kind of forgotten about it. But the first half of this movie just takes forever to get going. I never cared for the story or characters. And then you get to the second half where the spooky stuff is happening and you can't see a thing. And it's not even interesting in the way of Blair Witch Project. It's just dark and people screaming. And I was just like, wow, this movie is doing nothing for me. And then in the last 5 minutes, it's like, look how edgy we can be. Look at this guy cutting off his. And I'm just like, okay, now it feels like it's trying too hard. And I don't know. I just thought this movie was boring. It might be original, but it feels every bit as generic as they come. Yeah, it's just an instantly forgettable movie. Skinamarink did not make this list. I do not like Skinamarink. But at least that movie has some sort of a vision. It's boring as hell, but it has a vision. And this movie doesn't have a vision, and it's boring as hell. My sixth worst movie of 2023 is Five Nights at Freddy's. But Gavin, you don't understand the interesting back... Shut the fuck up. There is nothing interesting about this movie. You know what the funny thing is that I actually went into this movie with expectations. Like, I thought it could have been just a really fun movie. It could have been like Paranormal Activity at this rundown pizzeria. But instead, it focuses on this terrible backstory with the main character's brother and how he's taking sleeping pills each night, and then it just chose the least interesting story to tell. And I thought the world building and the lore was all ridiculous. Just nothing about this movie made me want to see more of this universe. I thought instead of scary, like, it was just absurd in the worst possible way. Like, the animatronics build this pillow fort, and I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, it's just a baffling movie. I don't think it's well directed, even though I do like the animatronics. I don't think it's well acted. It's never scary or fun or funny. It's actually quite boring. So yeah, I just really hated this movie. I know it has its fans. Apparently people like it, and if you do, it's all subjective. But I thought this movie was just terrible. The fifth worst movie of 2023 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And I've seen some people be like, if this movie's on your list, you need to see actual, like, more movies. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, did you see this? Like, this movie was an embarrassment. I think you're going to eventually be able to pinpoint the downfall of the MCU with this movie. I think it is that bad. And do you know what really pisses me off about it? Is that the second trailer to this movie was fantastic. I was legitimately super excited for this movie. I went in with high expectations. Like, that trailer, well, like, you know, Scott's just like, I don't have to beat you, we just both have to lose. And I'm just like, man, this seems like it's going to be good. And then I watched the movie, and I was just bewildered the entire time. Like, how do you make a movie this bad? Like, how? You know, I'll give the movie this. It did give me the biggest laugh of the year when we first see MODOK. That was hilarious. But even Kang, I thought was such a terrible villain. And I even thought that before everything was Jonathan Majors. Like, I don't think he was that good in this movie at all. I thought he was flat. I thought he was boring. And then this new Thanos level villain gets beaten up by ants. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is the best you can do? And then the movie begins with just Scott walking down the streets, not really concerned about anything. And then the movie ends with Scott walking down the street, almost concerned for a moment. But then he's back to not being concerned about anything. It's like they went out of the way to point out how he hasn't changed. And the fact that he is alive at the end of this movie, I thought was a coward's move. I really do. At this point, you need to start being willing to kill the main characters off, or at least have him stay in the quantum zone. The way this movie ended just made it feel like filler, like there was zero stakes. The movie's also visually hideous. I'm not a fan of this whole volume technology, and this movie is its absolute worst example. You've got like a supporting cast with like um, William Jackson Harper, Bill Murray, Michael Douglas, Michelle Pfeiffer, and you get them to give some of the worst performances ever. Nobody seemed like they wanted to be in this movie. Catherine Newton, I thought, was a good pick for Cassie, even though I do wish Abby Ryder-Fortson was returning. No, Abby Ryder-Fortson played the younger Cassie. Who played the Cassie in Avengers Endgame? I forget, but she was great. And you know what? I actually don't like the fact they even recasted her. She was really good. Yes. Why did they get Catherine Newton? I like her as an actress, and I think she could have been a good pick if nobody else was already Cassie. But she gives her least interesting performance. Every joke is as predictable as can be. Like, it's just one giant disaster. And, you know, not just the MCU. I think you can pinpoint the ending of superhero being like a reliable genre with this movie. You could actually see it. Like, it was going to break like 120 million opening weekend. Then it only opened to 106, which is still big. And then it dropped massively second weekend. And that was the moment. But anyways, I went on to the next movie. The fourth worst movie of 2023 is The Exorcist Believer. I love The Exorcist. Hot take, I know. But I just don't think it ever needed to be a franchise. I don't like any of the sequels. Not even the third one, to be honest. And this movie is just no exception. In fact, it might even be worse than The Exorcist 2. Like, this is a worst case scenario. This is every bit as dull and as generic as they come. There is nothing about this movie that stands out. Nothing about the story, nothing about the characters. There is zero emotion. It's never remotely scary. And then it brings certain modern sensibilities to this movie that just feels completely wrong. Like that line, well, Ellen Burstyn is like, oh, they didn't let me see my kid's exorcism because of the patriarchy. What? They didn't let you in because they didn't want you to see your daughter suffering a terrible fate. Like, fuck this movie. Like, how absolutely absurd. And then at the end, you know, it can't just be Catholic. It can't just be Catholic that is the right religion. Nope, every religion is true. Every religion is correct. And every religion saves the day. And everyone can hold hands and sing Kumbaya or whatever, and it's just this desperate attempt to try to please everyone. Like, it just made every wrong decision. Every connection to the original movie felt so incredibly forced. It's less than 2 hours long, and it felt way longer. And yeah, I know, I just think this movie made so many baffling decisions. I did not enjoy it. The only positive is the performances of the two girls were very good, but everything else, two thumbs way down. The third worst movie of the year, I kind of went back and forth with my second and third pick, but it's What Happens Later. This is a rom-com directed by Meg Ryan, and if you know me, you know I love rom-coms. All you have to do is be romantic and be funny, and there you go. I like your movie. I might even love it. That happens plenty of times. The only issue with this romantic comedy is that it's neither funny or romantic. Meg Ryan and David Duchovny give some of the worst performances of the year and of their careers. They have zero chemistry, and it just made this movie insufferable. It never worked. It's never funny, it's never sweet, it's never romantic, and it might have some of the worst pacing of this year. Like, it is an hour and 40 minutes, and there's a point where I thought the movie was ending, and it turns out there's still 40 minutes left. It actually pissed me off. This movie's insufferable, it's nearly unwatchable, I despised it, never watch it. Then we get to my second worst movie of 2023. And it's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, I despise this movie for many reasons I'll get into shortly, but The reason why it's so far down this list is because I actually like all 4 Indiana Jones movies, even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I love the way that movie ends. Indiana gets married to Marion, he discovers he has a kid, and he goes to pick up the hat, the fedora, and Indiana takes it back. It is the perfect finale. And they just took that ending and shat all over it. They took away his happy ending, and it just pissed me off. The movie was irredeemable at that point. And then they tried to give him the same happy ending with Marion again, but it's like, we've already done this. And on top of that, he has zero agency in his decision to be with Marion. He gets knocked out, he wakes up, and Marion's ill pretty much. Like, how is that a satisfying end to this character? It's not. It's like, why couldn't you leave this franchise alone? It exists to create money. There was no idea that inspired this movie. It was only money. So I'm glad this movie was a disaster at the box office. It deserved to do even worse. This is a dull, boring, generic movie. There's nothing about it that stands out remotely. It was one of the longest movies of the year, and it was just one that I found to be insufferable. The action lacks any bit of excitement. I don't want to see Indiana as an old man. I want to see him as the action hero. And then the entire plot where Indiana is wanted by the police, but then the writers just kind of forget about that. The new cast is very bland. I love Mads Mikkelsen. He has nothing to do here. And he gets like smacked in the face. And I thought he died for sure. And then later, they tease his reveal. And I'm like, oh, is his face going to be like messed up? And no, it's perfectly fine. And I'm like, bullshit. He's dead. That would have killed him. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I like as an actress. I love Fleabag. I thought she was really bad and annoying here. She was trying too hard. The last act with the time traveling, spoiler alert by the way, is completely absurd, but not even in a fun way. Like, what do they even do with that? So honestly, I thought this movie was boring. There was nothing about it I liked. It was generic. It ruined the ending of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it was just the very definition of a sequel that didn't need to exist. And the worst movie of 2023 is Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the movie that I will be least likely to ever watch again. I despise this movie. I think it is legitimately terrible. And let's begin by addressing the elephant in the room. This movie is 3.5 hours long. That is a long time. I could drive like pretty far down south to the mountains if I wanted to in that time. I could watch The Skeleton Key twice, I think. I could do so many other things with my time in that 3.5 hours. So if you're gonna be that long, you better be damn good. And this movie is just not. It is a bad movie. And there's just no justification for it with that one time. In fact, this movie would have been much better at 2 hours. You trimmed it down a bit, it would have been a better movie. It would not be on this list. But if you're going to be as long as this movie is, yes, I'm going to critique you a lot more harshly. And look, if I love a movie and it's long, then I don't care. I'm fine with it. I love Babylon, and that movie is very long. But if you're a bad movie and you're very long, well then it just becomes an insufferable watch. And boy, was this movie ever. I was miserable watching it. I wanted to leave the entire time. And I'm just baffled by the love it's receiving. I think it's a bad script. Like, let's begin with the characters. Everyone is so simplistic. Ernest is a simple man. He's dumb who just does what his uncle wants him to do. Molly is the victim character, and then Robert De Niro is nice to the Osage people, to their faces, and then behind their backs, he kills them. Or gets them killed. And like, that's all there is to each character. There's nothing all that interesting about them, and there's no real character arcs. In fact, this movie pretty much tells you everything you need to know in the first half hour. So you're just watching stuff happen that you already got told was going to happen. Like, there's no real mystery, there's no real progression of characters, and there's no real... There's one reveal at the very, very end of this movie, and it's as predictable as can be. And there's just no level of complexity to anything going on. Like, it's a rather simple movie, and I thought it was very repetitive. Like, someone dies, people are upset, the white men get richer, and then they kill someone else off, and then people are upset, they get richer. Rinse and repeat for so much of this movie, and it's just repetitive. Like, I get it. Move on. And on top of that, I'm just going to be honest, not a single death has any weight to it. I didn't care about anyone who died. They're not developed characters, and I just thought it was really poorly done. What else can I say? Well, it feels really redundant of other Martin Scorsese movies. And I feel like it was told from the wrong point of view. Molly should have been the main character. That could have been a fascinating movie. Well, she falls in love with someone, but she's unsure if she can trust him. And then by the end of the movie, she's faced with the harsh reality. That could have been really good, but instead they just tell it from the least interesting point of view, and it's just a baffling decision. I think, well, the movie's boring. It needs to be said. Like, I was never really engaged with the movie. I thought it was very dull. And the performances are just not good to me. Lily Gladstone gives the most overrated performance of the year. There is nothing good about her performance. It is the most hollow, empty performance I've seen all year. I do not think she is good in this movie. Robert De Niro, he just has nothing to really work with. Leonardo DiCaprio, I think this is one of his weakest performances. Brendan Fraser might be the one guy to stand out for me. He's the one memorable actor, even though he's in it for like 2 minutes. And the extras in this movie are awful. So, honestly, I think the movie is just terribly written. It lacks any bit of emotion. It's boring, it's repetitive, and it's just redundant. I love Martin Scorsese as a director. That needs to be said. I've loved so many of his movies. Goodfellas, The Departed, Wolf of Wall Street, Hugo. He's made so many phenomenal movies. He actually cares about preserving films, and I really respect that. And every interview I see with him, he seems like a wise man. But unfortunately, I think this movie is a total misfire from him. I hated it, and I think it's a terrible movie, and at the one time it has, it's insufferable. It is unwatchable to me. I'm done complaining. But anyways, that is my list of the worst movies of 2023, but what does your list look like? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos soon. And Gavin, out.